It is.
Welcome back to Morning Joe. Live look at the White House, the ribbon there, celebrating World AIDS Day. Today marks the 35th annual World AIDS Day, but the occasion comes at a time when continued U.S. funding for HIV/AIDS prevention hangs in the balance of a divided Congress. According to the White House, the U.S. global health program called PEPFAR, launched by President George W. Bush to reverse the HIV/AIDS epidemic, has saved more than 25 million lives around the world. But congressional reauthorization of the program has stalled, with some Republicans claiming the money might be used to fund abortions.
That's false. I just have to say that's completely false. And this is another Tommy Tuberville type tactic.
Yeah.
To look at things that are happening outside of the PEPFAR program that they may disagree and try to kill a program that has saved 25 million lives in the name of pro-life. That's, you talk about the bitter irony of it all.
Yeah, new polling out this morning shows that a majority of voters across the board think it is important for the U.S. to continue its commitment to the global AIDS response. During the creation of PEPFAR 20 years ago, then Senator Joe Biden worked across the aisle with his Republican counterpart, Rick Santorum of Pennsylvania, to pass the life-saving legislation. Morning Joe chief medical correspondent Dr. Dave Campbell recently sat down with former Senator Santorum to discuss the challenges today.
Why are we even having this discussion about abortion and AIDS relief?
Number one is a lot of the organizations that get funding don't just do medical assistance for people who are in AIDS, but they also do abortions, they do contraceptive, they do a whole host of other things. It's always been a tension in this program, and the oversight, how those monies are separated, and if they are, and the transparency is not what it should be.
Is there any way to, again, through compromise, separate it, get the medicines where it needs to go, and have the discussions that you're describing continue?
Yeah, I'd love to see the president actually lead on this and step forward and be clear that, I'm going to stay consistent with what, Donald Trump and Barack Obama and everybody else has done in the past. We're not going to play political games with this program, pushing off his progressive base, if you will, and saying, no, we're going to keep the compromise in place. And Mike Johnson, do the same thing. That's what we need to have happen. I know President Biden, when we worked on this in the Senate, was a very strong supporter of this and was one of the folks that we worked with to get this done. Hopefully he sees this as as I do, as one of the great accomplishments of my time in the Senate, and he'll want to preserve this program I can't imagine he wants to see this program fail under his watch.
What happens if Congress is done for the year and it's not reauthorized?
Yeah, the money's still there. Because the appropriation is there and the money will be spent. Okay. But what will go away is the vital compromise that has kept this a Republican and Democrat broadly supported program. It's become a partisan program. And I'll go back to, look at on the issue of abortion, for example. I mean, you have, when a Republican president comes in, they put in a policy called the Mexico City policy, which limits funding for, and when the Democrats come in, they get rid of the Mexico City policy.
Every time.
It's back and forth and back and forth. You don't want this program to be like that. Is gonna cost lives, and I hope the president realizes that and doesn't do things that are gonna make this every presidential election partisan issue as to how we're going to administer this program.
Well, fortunately, he's not. The president's not doing that.
The State Department provided a response regarding its PEPFAR program, which reads in part, quote, PEPFAR does not fund abortions, and PEPFAR funds cannot be used to lobby for or against abortion. And the Biden-Harris administration continues to urge Congress to pass a clean reauthorization of PEPFAR as part of our long-standing commitment to ending HIV/AIDS as a public health threat by 2030. And Dr. Dave joins us now. He's a contributor to Forbes on issues surrounding healthcare. Also with us, Democratic Senator Ben Cardin of Maryland, he's chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and he's out with a new op-ed for MSNBC urging his colleagues to renew this world-changing legislation. Also joining us, visiting scholar at Johns Hopkins University, Maya Rockemore Cummings. She is moderator for an event the school is hosting for World AIDS Day, focusing on how marginalized communities continue to bear a disproportionate burden of new infections.
And Senator, we saw the State Department statement. Could not be any clearer. PEPFAR is not about abortions. The money can't be used to lobby for abortions, can't be used to perform abortions. It's about saving lives with AIDS.
It's absolutely a fabricated issue. There is no funding for abortion in the PEPFAR program. The PEPFAR program is pro-life. 25 million lives have been saved.
Right.
I've been to Africa. I've seen the people whose lives have been saved as a result of the PEPFAR program now leading their country. We've seen it provide stability in African nations. We've seen it provide economic prosperity and stronger relations with the United States. This has been a transformational program, bipartisan, sponsored originally by President George W. Bush, bipartisan support. Right. This is the first time we've seen a partisan action by those that are trying to make abortion.
It just makes no sense. And Dr. Dave, you've written, I think, 4 articles for Forbes, and you just laid out what the senator just said. You laid out the fact that abortion is being pulled into this when it doesn't belong there by some Republicans in the House. I'm curious, what is the impact if PEPFAR goes away?
There are some short-term impacts, Joe, and then some longer-term things. In the short term, it's going to pull away the confidence in those PEPFAR-supported countries. In the longer term, it will suppress innovation. It will harm the ability for the programs to be developed and run. You guys all know how hard it is to put a program together. Imagine if now you only have a year window instead of 5, and you're trying to plan programs around kids and teenagers and young adults. It will suppress innovation, an overlooked phenomenon where the funding for new things like pre-exposure prophylaxis, we've taken 20 years ago, it was about $10,000 per year per patient to treat HIV. Now it's about $40 a year. 5 years from now, if we suppress innovation and money into funding and supporting new products and services, we won't make the same strides. It will reverse itself. It's still a very active epidemic.
So instead of saving lives, people...
Correct.
Yeah, people will die. Yeah.
Maya, and you're looking at specifically marginalized communities and how they can be impacted. And, of course, you're moderating an event at Hopkins about this.
Right.
Tell us all about it.
So we're actually hosting an event today called HIV and the Politics of AIDS. We're looking at the Minority AIDS Initiative at 25. Many people don't know that African Americans and Latinos have been disproportionately represented amongst the AIDS population basically since the early 80s. And in approximately 1987, actually, African Americans exceeded white Americans in terms of the percentage incidence of HIV amongst the population. So this has been a black and brown epidemic for quite some time now. And in 2019, out of all new infections, African Americans and Latinos were 67%. So on the international front, we know that, PEPFAR has done a lot in sub-Saharan Africa. But I actually think that this argument about abortion is a red herring. I think that we're seeing a continuation of the ultra-nationalist right wing. Some people call it white Christian nationalism, efforts to basically go after anything that supports people of color, anything that supports LGBTQ communities, anything that supports women. And certainly we know that the Minority AIDS Initiative, which was created in 1998 by Maxine Waters in order to address the disparities, and was actually undercut by the George W. Bush administration in terms of its ability to actually fund communities of color, particularly minority-led organizations, that we have a problem because we have, I think, racism interceding in our ability to effectively provide care. We know that now the new infections are hitting the South hardest, those states that refuse to expand Medicaid. So we've got a problem in this country. What we did for PEPFAR was fantastic. We need PEPFAR for America, and we need it to be non-discriminatory. So Johns Hopkins is looking at this today. The Center for Health Disparities is actually leading this under the leadership of Dr. Daryl Gaskin.
That's fantastic. You know, Peter, though, what's so fascinating is Maya talked about how Christian nationalists, extreme right people may be fighting back against PEPFAR. The great irony of that is George W. Bush was moved by his evangelical faith.
Exactly.
You look at the people that were around him, Mike Gerson, Pete Wehner, other people that were around him, evangelicals, and told him, this is the issue of our time. This is what we need to do as evangelicals. We need to save millions of lives. There's a plague in Africa. We need to save millions of lives.
Exactly.
And so you have people that are claiming to be pro-life trying to kill a program that was inspired by the New Testament.
Yeah, that's exactly right. George W. Bush calls in his staff. He calls in a guy named Tony Fauci. He says, what can we do to make a difference? Not just down the road, the research money on a vaccine. What can we do to make a difference today? And Tony Fauci actually says, you can save lives by doing what he ended up doing. And you know who's looked at this allegation that this current program is somehow funding abortions or somehow involved in abortions and decided it's not true? George W. Bush. Arguably the most pro-life president we've had since Reagan, right? Genuinely in his gut. Donald Trump, not really pro-life. He did a lot for pro-life interests, but he was not personally pro-life. George W. Bush is genuinely pro-life. He has looked at this program. He has said there's nothing to this, and he's told the Congress this. And yet his fellow Republicans aren't listening to him. And I'm curious, Senator, when you think about that, like, who are the Republicans today who have influence over their colleagues who are blocking this and say, look, we understand your concerns. They're not borne out. Don't worry about it. This is not doing what you think it's doing. Who do they listen to, if not George W. Bush at this point?
So the problem we have, of course, is that the national groups are interfering with, I think, the common sense of the Republicans right now. They're concerned about how they get rated on a vote rather than looking at the facts behind the issue. I mean, you're absolutely right. This program has been transformational. It's made a huge difference. If we don't reauthorize, it gives the message that we're not in it to complete the job. And that we need the partners around the world to work with us. And if the United States is not there, the concern is whether we will be able to complete the work and rid the world of HIV/AIDS. So we're working with Republicans. I think that most realize we need to get this done. We're going to try to find a way forward. But quite frankly, they're concerned about the outside rating groups that say this is against pro-life.
Chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Senator Ben Cardin. Morning, Joe. Chief Medical Correspondent Dr. Dave Campbell, thank you for shining a light on this continuously. And visiting scholar at Johns Hopkins University, Maya Rockeymoore Cummings. It's great to see you again, and thank you for coming on today. And Chief White House Correspondent for the New York Times, Peter Baker, thank you, as always, for your reporting as well. Our third hour of Morning Joe continues right now.